أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, my brothers and sisters in Islam. Inshallah, we will now continue on to looking at some of the more brief details about the events that led to the boycott and some of the details about the boycott period of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his Sahaba radiallahu anhum. Now, what we can see from the early stages, not to go into too much detail, but the private stages of the da'wah consisted of very handful of companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So for example, there was Ali, there was Zayd bin Harith, there's Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. There was very few companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam at that time. But it's when the da'wah, where the Prophet was commanded to take the da'wah to the public arena, to actually call for it publicly, this is when the Quraish started realizing that this is against them, that this is a threat to their authority. And this is not something new for us, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us about many stories about the prophets that have come before, like Musa alayhi salam, that when he came, he did not go and then give da'wah to the baker. He went straight to Fir'aun and he encountered him and actually spoke against him and wanted to the removal of him or for him to accept Islam. So it's no coincidence that the da'wah is to the mala or the rulers, because the rulers are the first and foremost obstacle for Islam to spread, because they are the ones who have power, authority, wealth and fame, and they stand to lose all of these things. So surely if there's a new system, a new way of life that is going to reorganize life in a way that they are not part of, and they cannot hold on to these things, the fame and the power and the authority and the wealth, then of course these will be the obstacle to establishing Islam. So it makes sense why the Prophet ﷺ would go towards changing, why the Prophet ﷺ would try to remove the rulers and would try to get them to accept Islam, so that they are no longer an obstacle to the establishment of Islam. Because today, brothers and sisters, even on this point, we have a situation where people are thinking that if they just pray for Obama to become Muslim because he has a middle name of Hussein, that somehow this is going to change the circumstances. Or people think that the da'wah to Islam is not calling to the aqidah and a comprehensive system, and that this is recognized as the succession of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the inheritance, which is the system of khilafah. No, this is the problem today, where people discuss only how many shahadas have you got? Or brother, we need to get more shahadas, thinking that the more numbers of Muslims from the 1.5 billion to the 1.7 billion, that just increasing the numbers will somehow establish Islam, when only a few thousand established Islam in Medina, and they were themselves 2/3 of the population of Medina weren't even Muslim. So this idea that we need to just increase more Muslims, subhanallah, the hidayah is actually with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So trying to make every single person a Muslim, and that making equals with this is going to establish Islam, this is not actually what took place even in the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and this should not be a single aim for us today. The other thing to look into is that from the private stage, this is what caused the mala, this is what caused the people with power, the people who stand to lose. It caused them to intensify their attacks against Islam, against the Prophet and his Sahaba. So, for example, they resorted to mockery. They used to say to the Prophet ﷺ, could not Allah have sent anyone better than you? Someone who was either richer or more powerful? Even though the Prophet ﷺ was from an elite tribe, they still attacked him because he was not very rich. He was not very powerful himself. So they attacked him and said, could not Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala send anyone else? Why you? Other things that they did was they personally, physically harmed the Prophet ﷺ. So one incident, it was Utbah ibn Mu'az, who threw intestines of the Prophet ﷺ while the Prophet ﷺ was praying in front of the Kaaba. Other incidences involve defamation, where the people, they claim that the Prophet ﷺ brought about a deen, brought about a Quran that was like rehashed stories of the past, even though they themselves knew that this was not the case. They also undertook the most saddest thing, was the character assassination, this plan to make the Prophet ﷺ look like as a person himself, that he was really, he was a bad person, even though they themselves named him Al-Amin, Al-Saddiq. They name him these things, and then after that they defame him. So they basically said that he was a soothsayer, a magician, a liar, a madman, A'udhu Billah, they called him many names. And yet, we see in today's society, the West, they know that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they know that he was trustworthy, they know he was of good moral standing, even by their own standards, they know this about him. Subhanallah. Yet what they do is they defame him. They defame him by preventing his message from being spread, or allowing their hounds, the media, to attack the Prophet ﷺ and his character, so that one could say they kill the messenger or shoot the messenger, so that the Prophet ﷺ's message is not alive today as a result. This is their aim. So this is something that also takes place today. Also, they tried to tempt the Prophet ﷺ away from his message. So they offered him money, they offered him wealth, they offered him power, they offered him kingship, they offered him women, they offered him even a doctor if they thought he was mad to reject all of the previous offers. But subhanAllah, the Prophet ﷺ said, this is not what I've been sent for, this is not what I want. It's not to do with the needs of the Prophet ﷺ, but rather the commandment that was put on him. Yet today we can see that we can say Allah is Al-Raziq, and yet we would say Al-Durura, maybe we can take IMF loans, or we can say that we should get power first, then try to implement Islam after, without generating the right basis for building an Islamic state. So we have countries that now say, oh, we wanted to get into power and now we will try to implement some of Islam. Well, they offered this kingship to the Prophet ﷺ. People say that we should have a democracy, and the majority, if they choose parts of Islam, we should accept it, and if they vote for parts of kufr, we should accept it. This is what democracy means, that man at the end makes laws. However, the Prophet ﷺ being offered this temptation, this idea that we can share, you rule for 1 year, we rule for 1 year, and then we let the people choose what system they like. SubhanAllah, yet again, this is something that the Prophet ﷺ rejected. Also, they tried to pressure the Prophet ﷺ via his uncle Abu Talib. They basically said to him, stop your nephew, stop him from speaking. If you let him speak, he's going to cause problems for everybody, for the society, for your tribe, and all of these things. But it was Abu Talib who loved his nephew so much. He said, continue what you're doing. If you can't, I know you're not going to stop continuing your call, so carry on. And he protected the Prophet ﷺ right to the bitter end. And so, these are the events that led to the boycott period, as well as two main stages in the da'wah that took place from this point. One was that the Bani Hashim and the Banu Muttalib, they were still protected as they were still strong tribes, i.e. the ones that were linked with the Prophet ﷺ. And also that the many other people who were becoming Muslim, they were traveling to Abyssinia and they were getting relief there, and therefore Muslims were still flourishing, and the Quraish were unable to contain that. So this is what led them to think about, how can we stop this da'wah from continuing? What step can we take? Because insulting and defamation hasn't worked. Now we have to try and ban them in some way and try and control them. So what tipped the balance was when Umar al-Khattab and Hamza, in very close periods of time, they themselves became Muslims. And when they became Muslims, this added extra strength to the believers, and this allowed the believers to pray in public. And as a result of that, the Quraish, they brought together and they put together a document, they hung it inside the Kaaba, stating very clearly that there would be a social boycott. That means that the family of the Prophet ﷺ and people of his tribe will not intermarry with anyone else. There was an economic boycott. That means they could not buy and sell, to really just starve and destroy their will. This is what they did to the Prophet ﷺ. And ironically, it was Abu Lahab, which was part of the tribe of the Prophet ﷺ himself, who betrayed and dissented from his own tribe to join the Quraysh in boycotting his own tribe. Subhanallah, this is the treachery of such a man. And it was from this boycott period that lasted many years that the Prophet ﷺ and his companions suffered and were tortured by this experience, and that many of the Muslims, especially the family of the Prophet ﷺ, suffered so greatly. It was especially noted that Khadija radiallahu anha suffered greatly at the hands of this stranglehold of the boycott that happened over them, and this is what subsequently led to the year of sorrow. And inshallah in the next video I will talk about how the boycott ended. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله العظيم.